during Mass. Right at the moment of communion, there you were, kneeling in the pew, approaching the altar with reverence, and suddenly, without warning, tears began flowing down your cheeks. Perhaps you felt embarrassed, thinking others might judge you for showing such emotion in a sacred space. Maybe you wondered if it was just human weakness, an overflow of sentiment, or something you couldn't quite understand. But what if I told you that those tears might be one of the most profound spiritual experiences you could have during the Eucharist? You're not alone in this mystery. Thousands of Catholics worldwide have experienced this same phenomenon, tears that come unexpectedly during the reception of Holy Communion. Some describe it as an overwhelming sense of love, others as deep sorrow for their sins, and still others as inexplicable joy that their hearts simply cannot contain. These aren't tears of sadness or mere emotion. They're something far deeper, something that touches the very essence of your relationship with Christ. The question isn't whether you should feel embarrassed about crying during Mass. The question is, what is God trying to tell you through these sacred tears? Saint Faustina Kowalska, the great mystic of divine mercy, experienced this phenomenon repeatedly throughout her spiritual life. In her diary, she recorded moments when receiving Jesus in the Eucharist moved her to tears that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. She discovered that these weren't random emotional outbursts, but rather profound spiritual communications from the heart of Jesus himself. Through her experiences and the revelations she received, we can begin to understand what your own tears during communion might truly mean. The truth is, when you cry during the Eucharist, you may be experiencing one of the most intimate encounters possible between your soul and Jesus Christ. Your heart recognizes something your mind might not yet fully comprehend, that in that consecrated host, the Son of God is truly present, waiting to unite himself completely with you. Those tears could be your soul's deepest response to love itself coming to dwell within you. Are you ready to discover what St. Faustina learned about the sacred mystery of tears during Holy Communion? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more teachings and counsel from St. Faustina. In the pages of her diary, St. Faustina wrote with remarkable honesty about her experiences during Holy Communion. She wasn't describing mere sentimentality or emotional reactions. She was documenting authentic mystical encounters that left her overwhelmed with tears of the deepest spiritual significance. In entry 1289, she recorded, "After Holy Mass was over, I didn't know whether I was in heaven or on earth. God's presence flooded my soul with happiness that I cannot describe. I felt completely immersed in God." These weren't the words of someone caught up in emotion, but of a soul touching the very reality of Christ's presence in the Eucharist. What makes St. Faustina's testimony so powerful is that she experienced these tears not as weakness, but as a profound gift of grace. She wrote in entry 1385, "Today I prepare myself for the coming of the King. When I receive Jesus in Holy Communion, I try to be very recollected." Her tears during communion weren't distractions from prayer. They were prayer itself, the deepest form of communication between her heart and Jesus. She understood that when Christ enters the soul through the Eucharist, the encounter can be so overwhelming that tears become the only adequate response to such infinite love and mercy. The diary reveals that St. Faustina's tears during communion served multiple purposes in her spiritual life. Sometimes they were tears of repentance, as she became acutely aware of her sinfulness in the presence of perfect holiness. Other times they were tears of gratitude, as she marveled that God would choose to unite himself so intimately with her poor soul. Most profoundly, they were tears of mystical union, moments when the barrier between earth and heaven seemed to dissolve entirely. She wrote, "The strength of my whole soul comes from the most Blessed Sacrament. I spend all my free moments conversing with him. He is my master." Perhaps most importantly, Saint Faustina learned to recognize these tears as authentic signs of God's action in her soul because of their fruits. After crying during communion, she didn't feel drained or emotionally exhausted. Instead, she felt filled with peace, strength, and an increased desire to love and serve God. She wrote, "All that is good in me comes from Holy Communion. I owe everything to it. I feel that this sacred fire has completely transformed me." Her tears weren't taking her away from God, they were drawing her deeper into his heart. This is the key difference between tears that come from human emotion and tears that come from divine grace, the fruits they produce in your spiritual life. Through St. Faustina's revelations and the wisdom of the Church's mystical tradition, we can understand that there are three distinct types of tears that flow during the reception of Holy Communion, each with its own spiritual significance and purpose in your journey toward God. The first type are tears of compunction, deep sorrow for sin that arises when your soul encounters the perfect holiness of Christ in the Eucharist. These aren't tears of despair or hopelessness, but rather the healing tears of authentic repentance. When Jesus enters your heart through communion, his purity can make you acutely aware of your own sinfulness, not to condemn you, but to cleanse and purify you. The second type are tears of gratitude and wonder, the response of a heart that suddenly comprehends the incredible magnitude of God's love. Saint Faustina experienced this frequently, writing, "O Jesus, what ardor you unite yourself to me in Holy Communion. Your blood mingles with my blood, your soul with my soul, your body with my body, your life with my life." When you truly grasp that the Creator of the universe chooses to become your intimate companion through the Eucharist, gratitude can overwhelm your heart to the point of tears. These are the tears of a soul that recognizes it is receiving far more than it could ever deserve. The third and most profound type are tears of mystical union. Moments when the veil between heaven and earth becomes thin and your soul touches something of the divine reality that awaits in eternity. Saint Faustina described such experiences. After Holy Communion, I felt the beating of the heart of Jesus in my own heart. Though I am misery itself, I nevertheless united myself to the heart of Jesus, and my misery was absorbed into his greatness. These tears come not from understanding something with your mind, but from your soul's direct encounter with the love that moves the stars and holds all creation in existence. If you've ever experienced tears during communion and want to understand their deeper meaning, write in the comments, "Jesus, I trust in you," and share this video so others can discover the secret of tears in the Eucharist. What's remarkable about all three types of tears is that they share a common source. They arise when your soul recognizes truth, whether it's the truth of your need for mercy, the truth of God's incredible love, or the truth of your deepest identity as a beloved child of God. Tears during communion are often your heart's most honest response to reality. Saint Faustina learned that these tears shouldn't be suppressed or dismissed as mere emotion, but rather received as gifts that can transform your entire relationship with Christ and deepen your faith in ways you never imagined possible. Saint Faustina discovered through her mystical experiences that tears during the Eucharist serve as a profound form of interior purification that goes far beyond what we might accomplish through our own efforts at prayer or penance. She wrote in her diary, "Everything good in me comes from Holy Communion. I owe everything to it. I feel that this sacred fire has completely transformed me." These tears, she learned, weren't just emotional responses. They were actual graces flowing from Christ's presence, washing away not only sin but also the hardness of heart that prevents us from loving God and neighbor as we should. When you cry during communion, Jesus is performing a deep cleansing of your soul that touches places even you might not know need healing. The second profound meaning Saint Faustina uncovered was that these tears represent moments of authentic intimacy with the divine, encounters that break through all the barriers we unconsciously erect between ourselves and God. She experienced this intimacy so powerfully that she wrote, "O Jesus, hidden in the most blessed sacrament, you are my only love and all my mercy. I unite myself to you through all my sufferings, joys, and sorrows, everything in union with you." Your tears during communion might be the sign that Jesus is inviting you into this same level of intimate relationship where pretense falls away and your heart meets his heart without reservation or fear. Saint Faustina also recognized that tears during the Eucharist often indicate a moment of profound spiritual awakening, your soul's recognition that something extraordinary is happening that transcends normal human experience. She wrote, "Today, God's presence pierced me like a ray of sun. When God visits me, I am filled with such peace that even if I wanted to worry or be afraid, I couldn't. I feel as if I am annihilated in His greatness." When you cry during communion, you may be experiencing this same divine visitation, this moment when the ordinary boundaries of time and space seem to dissolve and you touch something eternal and infinite. Perhaps most importantly, Saint Faustina learned that these tears are often God's way of confirming and strengthening your faith. In our modern world, it's easy to doubt whether God is real, whether He truly cares about us, whether our prayers make any difference. But when tears flow during communion, especially when they come unexpectedly and bring peace rather than agitation, they serve as a direct personal confirmation that Jesus is not just a historical figure or a theological concept, but a living person who wants to have a real relationship with you. Saint Faustina understood that these tears were Jesus' way of saying, "I am here, I love you, I am transforming you, trust in me." While St. Faustina treasured her experiences of tears during the Eucharist, she also learned the crucial importance of spiritual discernment, the ability to distinguish between tears that come from God and those that arise from purely human emotions or even spiritual deception. She wrote in her diary about the need for careful examination. Not graces, nor revelations, nor ecstasy, nor any other gift bestowed on a soul makes it perfect, but the interior communion of the soul with God. My holiness and perfection consist in a close union of my will with the will of God. This wisdom teaches us that the value of tears during communion isn't found in the emotional experience itself, but in how they draw us closer to conformity with God's will. The first test St. Faustina applied was examining the fruits that followed her experiences of tears during communion. Authentic tears from God, she discovered, always produced lasting spiritual benefits: increased humility, deeper desire for prayer, greater love for others, and a stronger resolve to avoid sin. She wrote, "The Holy Communion gives me amazing strength. Oh, how I regret that I can't always receive it. If the sisters knew what strength Holy Communion gives us, there wouldn't be so much negligence." If your tears during the Eucharist leave you feeling more peaceful, more loving, and more committed to living as a faithful Catholic, they are likely authentic movements of grace. Saint Faustina also learned to distinguish between tears that draw attention to God and tears that draw attention to herself. Authentic spiritual tears, she discovered, always lead the soul to focus more completely on Jesus rather than on the experience itself. She wrote, "I desire to receive you in Holy Communion with a heart as pure as your mother's. I desire to unite myself with you as closely as your mother united herself to you." When tears during communion make you more aware of Jesus' presence and love, rather than making you feel special or superior to others, they are likely genuine graces that should be received with gratitude and humility. The final criterion St. Faustina used was whether her experiences aligned with Catholic teaching and led her to greater obedience to the Church. She always submitted her spiritual experiences to her spiritual director and remained completely faithful to Church doctrine and discipline. Authentic tears during the Eucharist will never lead you away from Catholic teaching or make you feel that you're above the need for sacraments, regular prayer, or moral living. Instead, they will deepen your appreciation for all the means of grace the Church provides and increase your desire to participate more fully in the life of faith. If your experiences lead you to pride, spiritual elitism, or rejection of Church authority, they require careful examination and possibly spiritual direction. Saint Faustina discovered that authentic tears during the Eucharist were not just momentary spiritual experiences, but catalysts for profound and lasting transformation of the entire soul. She wrote in her diary, "My whole strength lies in you, living bread. It would be difficult for me to live even one day without Holy Communion. It is my shield. Without you, Jesus, I don't know how to live." She learned that when God grants the grace of tears during communion, He is promising to work a deep change in your spiritual life that will affect every aspect of how you relate to Him, to others, and to yourself. These aren't just beautiful moments to remember. They are divine interventions designed to reshape your entire existence around Christ. The first transformation St. Faustina experienced was a dramatic deepening of her faith and trust in God's mercy. The tears that flowed during communion weren't just emotional releases. They were moments when Jesus was literally rewiring her heart to trust Him more completely. She wrote, "Jesus, I trust in you," became more than a prayer for her. It became the fundamental attitude of her entire life. When you experience tears during the Eucharist, Jesus is offering you this same transformation, the ability to move through life with unshakable confidence that God's love and mercy are more powerful than any suffering, failure, or fear you might encounter. Saint Faustina also discovered that tears during communion produced a supernatural capacity for love that went far beyond human capability. She wrote, "O Jesus, I desire to love you with a love so great that no soul has ever loved you before. I desire to make reparation to you for all the offenses made against you." This wasn't spiritual ambition or pride, it was the natural fruit of encountering Christ so intimately in the Eucharist. When authentic tears flow during communion, Jesus is expanding your heart's capacity to love Him and others in ways that would be impossible through willpower alone. You may find yourself more patient with difficult people, more generous with your time and resources, and more willing to forgive those who have hurt you. Perhaps most remarkably, Saint Faustina found that her experiences of tears during communion gave her a supernatural resilience in the face of suffering and trials. She wrote, "Suffering is the greatest treasure on earth. It purifies the soul. In suffering we know who is our true friend. The tears that Jesus grants during the Eucharist don't promise to eliminate difficulties from your life, but they do promise to give you the grace to unite your sufferings with His own, transforming every pain into a means of spiritual growth and a way to participate in the salvation of souls. When you cry during communion, you're being prepared for a life of deeper meaning and purpose, where even your hardships become opportunities to love more perfectly." While Saint Faustina received extraordinary graces during the Eucharist, she also understood that preparation and cooperation with God's grace were essential elements in cultivating a deeper spiritual life. She wrote in her diary, "I desire to approach you in Holy Communion with a heart as pure as your mother's heart." She discovered that certain practices and attitudes could help prepare the soul to be more receptive to whatever graces Jesus wanted to give, including the gift of tears during communion. These weren't techniques to manipulate God or guarantee spiritual experiences, but rather ways to remove obstacles and open the heart more fully to divine love. The first practice Saint Faustina emphasized was thorough preparation before receiving communion, particularly through regular confession and careful examination of conscience. She wrote, "Today I prepare myself for the coming of the King. When I receive Jesus in Holy Communion, I try to be very recollected." She understood that approaching the Eucharist with unconfessed mortal sins or a hardened heart could block the flow of grace that might otherwise move the soul to tears. Regular confession, she discovered, wasn't just about avoiding sin. It was about maintaining a heart that was soft and receptive to God's movements. When you prepare your soul through the sacrament of reconciliation, you're creating space for Jesus to work more powerfully during communion. Saint Faustina also discovered the profound importance of spending time in adoration before the Blessed Sacrament as preparation for receiving communion. She wrote, "I worship you, Creator and Lord, hidden in the most blessed sacrament. I worship you for all the works of your hands, which reveal so much wisdom, goodness, and mercy." Regular periods of Eucharistic adoration taught her to recognize Christ's presence more clearly and to develop the spiritual sensitivity necessary to perceive His movements in her soul. When you spend time simply being present with Jesus in the tabernacle, you're training your heart to recognize Him more readily when He comes to you in communion. The practice Saint Faustina found most crucial was remaining in grateful prayer for an extended period after receiving communion. She wrote, "After Holy Communion, I felt the beating of the heart of Jesus in my own heart. Rather than immediately returning to distractions or rushing from church, she would spend significant time in thanksgiving, allowing Jesus to speak to her heart and work whatever transformation He desired." This practice of remaining recollected after communion created the interior space where tears and other graces could flow freely. She recommended spending at least 15 minutes in prayer after receiving the Eucharist, if possible, treating this time as sacred and protecting it from all unnecessary distractions. Saint Faustina, despite her profound mystical experiences, remained acutely aware of the spiritual dangers that could accompany extraordinary graces, like tears during communion. She wrote in her diary, "I have also to know that there are three spirits, good, evil, and human. It is clear that I should always follow the good spirit, but there are times when it is difficult to distinguish between the good spirit and the human spirit, and that is when I turn to my spiritual director. Her wisdom teaches us that not every tear shed during Mass comes from God, and that discernment is always necessary when dealing with what appears to be supernatural experiences." One of the primary dangers Saint Faustina identified was spiritual pride, the temptation to believe that experiencing tears or other phenomena during communion makes you more spiritual than other Catholics. She constantly reminded herself, "The more I know God, the more I realize how little I know Him." When tears during the Eucharist lead to feelings of superiority, judgment of others who don't have such experiences, or a sense that you've achieved some elevated spiritual status, these are warning signs that pride may be corrupting what might have been an authentic grace. True spiritual experiences always produce humility and compassion for others, not spiritual elitism. Another significant danger is becoming attached to the emotional experience rather than to Jesus Himself. Saint Faustina learned that seeking particular feelings or phenomena during communion could actually block authentic spiritual growth. She wrote, Not graces, nor revelations, nor ecstasy, nor any other gift bestowed on a soul makes it perfect, but the interior communion of the soul with God. When you find yourself evaluating the success of your communion based on whether you cried or felt particular emotions, you've shifted focus from Jesus to your own spiritual experience. This can lead to disappointment when the tears don't come, or worse, to manufacturing emotional responses that aren't authentic. Saint Faustina also warned against the danger of spiritual sensationalism, sharing intimate spiritual experiences inappropriately or using them to gain attention from others. She was extremely discreet about her extraordinary graces, sharing them only with her spiritual director and writing about them in her diary only because Jesus specifically commanded her to do so. If tears during communion become something you feel compelled to discuss frequently with others or use to demonstrate your spiritual sophistication, this is a sign that the experience may be serving your ego rather than your spiritual growth. Authentic graces from God produce a natural desire for discretion and humility, not a need to broadcast your spiritual experiences to others. The authentic fruits of tears during the Eucharist, as demonstrated in St. Faustina's life and the lives of countless other faithful Catholics, extend far beyond the moments of the experience itself into practical, observable changes in how one lives the Christian life. Maria, a mother from Mexico, shared how experiencing unexpected tears during communion for the first time led her to examine her relationship with her teenage daughter, whom she had been treating with constant criticism and impatience. After several months of receiving this grace during Mass, she found herself naturally becoming more patient, more willing to listen, and more aware of her daughter's struggles rather than just her failures as a student and helper around the house. Carlos, a businessman from Colombia, testified that his experience of tears during communion coincided with a gradual but profound change in how he conducted his professional life. He had been involved in several questionable business practices, not anything illegal, but certainly not fully honest or fair to his customers and employees. After beginning to experience tears during Mass, he found himself unable to continue these practices without feeling deep discomfort. Over the course of a year, he completely restructured his business to operate with complete integrity, even when it meant lower profits. He credits his experiences during communion with giving him both the motivation and the courage to live his faith more authentically. Anna, an elderly woman from Spain, shared that her tears during the Eucharist helped her forgive her son, who had abandoned the family 15 years earlier and had never made contact since. For years, she had carried bitterness and anger that poisoned her relationships with her other children and made her prayer life cold and mechanical. When she began experiencing tears during communion, she realized that Jesus was asking her to let go of her resentment and trust him with her son's future. The tears became a form of healing that allowed her to pray for her son with genuine love rather than hurt, and eventually to reach out to him with a letter of forgiveness that led to a gradual reconciliation. What makes these testimonies particularly powerful is that none of these individuals sought out tears during communion or considered themselves especially spiritual before these experiences began. They were ordinary Catholics dealing with ordinary struggles, but Jesus used their openness during the Eucharist to work extraordinary transformations in their hearts and lives. Saint Faustina wrote, "The Holy Communion gives me amazing strength. Oh, how I regret that I can't always receive it." These modern testimonies echo her experience, that authentic graces received during communion produce not just momentary feelings, but lasting changes that affect every aspect of how we love God